All right, we are live on Tuesday night. This is Dr. Boz, and we really do have an awesome show for you tonight. I've been struggling with it for the last couple of minutes, so you're going to want to stick around. Because if you've ever been the person who said, yeah, this keto thing is not working for me, I am having a disconnect between the rest of the world and all their praise for this silly thing, because I still can't get those last 20 pounds off. I'm at a plateau. It's not working for me. You are going to love what I am talking to tonight. I am going to give a special thank you to all the students in my 21-day class because they got to hear a little bit of this last week as I was practicing using the slides. And, you know, it's actually a really good thing that I get a chance to see where did I lose my audience? Where did they not understand? And this is always a struggle that, believe it or not, I do lose sleep about. Like, did they understand? Did they get it? And I am checking blood sugars now and my ketones as I am, I don't know, 60 hours into a fast. I am going for a full 72-hour fast this week. So ketones 2.7, glucose 7.0. And in the spirit of not having anything in my fast except salt and water, I am just going to drink plain old bubble water tonight, not any pucker up or anything in my extras. I'm looking at the comments here and seeing several of my favorites out there, Patrick and Michelle, and several of Busha is there. So thank you for tuning in. Becky Nolan, nice to see you again. Gail Johnson, again, lots of Eric, Karen Lee Edwards, all of the folks that have been checking in for quite a while, and I do appreciate it. Tonight's lecture is going to be a little bit sciencey, so if you like that, stick around. By the end, you're going to see a couple of my favorite reasons why you should do a few things we do on the Dr. Boz channel, which is measure. We're going to get right into the lecture because I think it's going to take me a little longer than I might have on other weeks. So again, when you're watching this, I have a couple of really wonderful helpers in the background who are looking for questions that relate to this topic. So we don't always get every question answered on the live, but we really do try to answer those questions that relate to this topic. So if you are someone who has been having trouble or think, do I really need to lose that last 20 pounds? Does it really matter? Well, I'm going to try to drive home a couple of really important teaching points that I definitely make when I'm seeing patients one-on-one, but I was trying to think, I don't think I've ever done this one on YouTube. So, all right, here we go. Let's see if I can push all the right buttons and get you to the place where yes, this is what I want. All right, so we're going to start by talking about something called an oral glucose tolerance test. An oral glucose tolerance test is a test we use in practice. Commonly, if you've been pregnant, we used it to see, did you have gestational diabetes? You come in, and at the 0 point in time, we measure your glucose. We then say, hey, now drink a bunch of sugar. 75 grams is a common one, and in this study we're going to look at, they drank 75 grams. And then we're going to measure things at 30 minutes. I'll tell you, sometimes, in many practices, they skip that, and they say, nah, just check it in 2 hours, come back in 2 hours, and we'll see what your numbers are at the 2-hour mark. After this study, you're going to see that you should really be looking at it a lot more often than that. There's a lot to be learned from what's happening to your glucose in response to a glucose load and what we can predict from that. So let's take away some of those markings before I fill up the rest of the slide with a whole bunch of numbers. So let's look at the first of our patients, our profiles here. This is a woman, this is a person who's got a body mass index of 24. And you say, yeah, that's a pretty healthy BMI. That BMI is considered healthy. And I know people chirp about BMI isn't a great predictor of, and then fill in the blank. But I'm telling you, it really does help me. It's a good gets us close to what we need to learn. And these next few slides are going to be separated by only a slight difference in the BMI. So as I click over here, there you go. So in here, you'll see that glucose at the beginning was right around 100. It peaked at just about 126 at the 30-minute mark, and then it landed at about right back where it started, which is close to that. Not that what I want to do. I want to change this. Hold on. Don't. There we go. This one. I'll make my head a little. Actually, I'll put it up here. All right. So let's see if that gets in the way less. All right. So it comes right back down to almost at baseline. So the next group of people had a body mass index that was just a little bit higher, right on the edge of normal to not normal. My BMI, in seasons when I'm being good, flips up to that just under 25, or in the 24 point high numbers. So just about, if I was rounding to 25, when I'm doing better, it's in the 23 to 24 range. But you'll notice their blood sugars started out again right around that 105. Not bad, especially if they're not fasting. I mean, they haven't eaten in the last few hours, so you can say that. But it's middle of the day. They've been up. They came to the lab. That 105 isn't terrible. But when they took in the 75 grams of glucose, their blood sugar shot up to about 155. And then at the end of the 2 hours, it was back to 126, but definitely not back to their baseline, which was closer to here. All right, so let's move on to the next profile. So at a BMI of 26, they had a much different look. Now, if you were just checking the beginning and the end of this glucose tolerance test, you'd see their blood sugars came in at 108, and then at the 2 hour mark, it was as good as the folks in green. If they weren't checking the 30-minute mark, they would miss the fact that their blood sugars were nearly 200 at the 30-minute mark. So what else is to be learned by this? All right, so I'm going to move my head over here, and you're just going to have to remember what the rest of those body mass looks like. All right, so hang tight. I'll erase all my little marks because the next one gets a little more complicated. We're going to add some dotted lines. Oh, I forgot that. Oh, I forgot the worst one. Yeah, so their blood sugars started out at 108. Tipped out at the 2 hour mark at over 180. And by the end of the 2 hours, their glucose was still above 160. So clearly had something wrong. If the team was only checking the beginning and the end, they could absolutely separate out who was the most at risk here. And you're going to see that in just a second. So let's now add another data point to this group. If we were looking at insulin, when we look at the folks that had a body mass index of 24, they did take not an excessive amount of insulin. And when you look at how did the insulin get all the way back to baseline at the 2 hour mark, it did not. But yeah, when you look at the folks who started out with a little bit higher blood sugar and their body mass index was at 25, so that extra 15 to, or actually about 5 pounds in many of the heights. By the third time, you look at how much insulin it took to get this person's glucose controlled, and you would contend with a blood sugar of 200, they did not control their numbers. The amount of insulin that is being secreted is, well, it's more than the previous two groups, but it does come down. This is where that group 2's insulin came back down to. I don't know if you can see that in the background, whereas group 3, this orange, it did have a lower amount of insulin by the time the 2 hours was up. All right, keep going here. Here's our final one. Their amount of insulin at the 30-minute part, again, trying to control the blood sugars, was the highest of all the groups. Yes, the highest of all the groups. And as you followed out for the 2 hour mark, the insulin was up to about 60 units of insulin when they got to the end. So the question we're going to answer here is, well, what does that have to do with weight loss? Why is that happening? And what can you do to look at your own body metrics to say, okay, we could use body mass index to predict which one you are. It is not the perfect predictor. there are some really important things that you can study on your own at home. It helps a lot if you have a continuous glucose monitor because you can follow your glucose along the way. But I'm going to explain exactly what is on a cellular level is happening to these 4 groups of patients as they begin out at a normal glucose, fasting glucose, response to glucose, and the amount of insulin it takes to control the glucose. And then what happens at the cellular level as those 4 groups went up. Stick around to the end because there is a punchline. Like, why do you care? Sure, 20 pounds is nice to have off, but there's more to this story. So let's get back to this and say a little prayer that nothing crashes in this next set. All right, so here is this slide deck, and it may look that like this is a, I don't know, a piece of ham with a bone that you're going to eat at Thanksgiving, but it's not. That is a muscle group coming off of a bone, a tendon leading into muscle fibers. And much like a bunch of Russian dolls, you'll see one group fade into the next group, fade into the next group, and that tiny thing at the end is a muscle fiber. If I was to magnify them even further, you would see that these muscle fibers look much like this, and there's really a sheath around the outside that kind of holds them together. I did not start with this picture because I think they look like hot dogs, and you have to kind of know where I'm at in your body in order to say, what are you talking about? Why are you teaching us about hot dogs? So I want you to, these muscle fibers are not hot dogs, they really are muscle fibers. And when I look inside a muscle cell, you're going to see that yellow lining on the outside is a biphospholipid layer. It's what every one of your cells is lined with, and it coats the outside of the cell. I want you to pretend like I cut off the edge of it, and we can now look inside the muscle cell. You see some beautiful mitochondria in there, and these mitochondria are very taut. They're very filled and plump. They have lots of little folds in them, and that's going to be important later. But right now, there's no other things in the way of that muscle cell. As I look at the characters we're going to talk about, I'm going to put me off screen just long enough to say, this is insulin. He is healthy Mr. Insulin. And the place where he binds to is called an insulin receptor. The other characters in this slide are the glucose and the glucose receptors. All right, so I do think we are going to need to, oh, you know what? I'm just going to go over to this one. We are going to talk about those 2 little receptors that are tucked into the cell lining here. And the example I'm going to start with is a patient who does not make insulin. So even though this Mr. Insulin looks like the healthy guy because he's got a happy face and he's not growly, really this patient has no insulin, which is not healthy. You cannot live without insulin. You need some. Insulin is not the bad guy, even though I demonize him plenty on my channel. You're going to see that insulin is required to talk to these receptors in order for the glucose to get inside the cell. All right, so when that doesn't happen, the glucose stays in the cytoplasm. And that cytoplasm has, or in the circulation, it does not get inside the muscle cell. When only outside the muscle cell, these mitochondria inside the cells can't be fueled by glucose. They're starving from glucose is another way to say that. So as you look at the next scene would be a normal insulin. People that are healthy, think of children that have not been eating processed carbohydrates for the last couple of years. Think of them as eating whole foods. What would their insulin and glucose receptors look like? So here's Mr. Insulin. Notice that we've got some nice healthy mitochondria on the inside of that muscle cell. The glucose is in circulation. It's outside the muscle cell. And now you're going to watch what happens when insulin binds to that receptor. It sends a message over to those GLUT4 receptors. Think of those GLUT4 receptors as a siphon or a straw, and they are going to suck glucose into the cell. There is no other. The energy required to move that GLUT4 receptor into that layer of the lining of the cell is completely dependent on insulin. Now, I've stopped the slide at this point for you to notice that the blood sugar, the one when I prick my finger at the beginning of a show and I show you the number, that blood sugar just lowered. It lowered because the glucose, the sugar, went into my cells, into a cell, this cell, and now that insulin says, hey, the blood sugars went down, and one of them will dissociate. When that happens, that GLUT receptor, that straw, now pulls back into the inside of the cell, and only one straw is left. Now, this patient is healthy, so a healthy insulin will still keep at least one straw there and pull in the glucose to deliver what the muscle cell needs. And as soon as that blood sugar lowers, the insulin dissociates and that receptor sinks back into the inside of the cell, waiting for the next time the signal will rise. The insulin floats off and does its job in another place. With the movement of insulin throughout our bodies, an endocrine, a hormone, if it is a hormone, that insulin is dictating whether or not this muscle cell gets to use glucose at all. So when we look at people that are insulin sensitive, that means their insulin is normal. It is not associated with a high inflammatory problem. It is not associated with a bunch of fat cells that are filled. It's a different equation. It's a time when the insulin resistance is a higher gang, if you would, of insulin. And then I drew these differently. They're inflammatory. They pull in water. They put slime and mucus and grime around every cell in your body. It's around the cells in your lungs, around the cells in your kidneys, around the cells in your brains. That excessive amount of insulin isn't just moving glucose from the outside of a cell to the inside of the cell in hopes to deliver energy. It's also causing pathology. It's causing problems. So as you look at this insulin-resistant patient, this is our teaching moment. And this is going to come back to loop through the slides we went to at the beginning. Insulin resistance is linked to a whole bunch of insulin around, and we've still got our same muscle cell here. You'll notice those two straws are inside the cell. We've got a bunch of glucose on the outside. We've got our biphospholipid layer. We're going to change a few things. First, we're going to add 5 receptors. Where did they come from? They came from years of excessive amounts of insulin being produced. And when that insulin rose, so did the number of parking spots on this muscle cell. In order to get a job done now, all 5 of those parking spots need to be filled. There's one more difference between that healthy cell and this insulin-resistant cell. Those mitochondria, they ain't so healthy anymore. This mitochondria specifically it's got holes in it. That when you look at these defects right here, I'm going to use a white. Those holes are where, as energy used to flow along here, turning glucose into energy or a ketone, out of these holes is where it leaks energy. And that turns into a bunch of damage that is happening at a cellular level, actually intracellular level inside the cell. So let's put that back, and I want you to know these are not these beautiful, taut, plump mitochondria with lots of folds. They're broken. They're unhealthy. All right, so here we go. This is what happens inside the cells of people who are not losing that extra 10 pounds. They're not losing that final amount of weight. So the insulins bind to all 5 receptors. And only when 5 receptors are bound to those, 5 insulin are bound to those receptors, did that glucose go up, that GLUT4 receptor go up into the wall. Now the straw is open, but notice what happened. As soon as the blood sugars lowered, one of your 5 insulin dissociated. It ran away. It's not allowing that signal for insulin to go in there anymore. So what happens when insulin can't do that? Well, it's much like what happens in a well, I'm going to show you what happens with keto, but it's much like what happens with people who don't have enough insulin. You're like, wait a minute, there's all this insulin, and you're saying that's similar to cells that in a body that have no insulin? Yeah, take a look. All right, so we have an insulin-resistant patient. We then put them on a ketogenic diet, which means we lower their blood sugar. And what happens when you lower the blood sugar? Well, you do not make as much insulin. The amount of blood sugar, you bring in a bunch of carbohydrates, which raises your blood sugar, and that blood sugar signals how much of the insulin will be produced. Well, you're insulin resistant, and you're only making 3 insulin now. So as those 3 insulin do what they do, which is bind to the receptors, there's a major problem. That is not enough to bring one of the straws up to the edge of the cells. And those little mitochondria are quivering, waiting for a fuel to show up. In fact, did you see one of them died? I think I can go back a slide. I'm going to do that one more time. So those 3 insulins bind to those receptors, and now the insulin, the mitochondria are on the inside saying, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. And they quiver, they send a signal, I need fuel, I need fuel. And you'll notice the one in the middle, it dies. It's apoptosis, it's organelle death. The mitochondria wasn't healthy enough to live through the stress. And what the stress was doing was sending out an APB to the liver to say, I don't care, get me a fuel that is not dependent on insulin. So this insulin, this cell has plenty of insulin around. There's glucose on the outside. Because it's insulin resistant, it can't make it. It can't get the fuel into the cell where it needs it. And when patients are going through that season where, why do I feel so punk? Why do I feel so heavy? Why do my muscles feel like jello? Now, it only lasts for about 48 or 36 hours as long as they don't give in, as long as they keep sending the signal to their liver. Because not only does the liver need to make the ketones, and that's what those little blue fellows are here, these are ketones, but the ketones have to get to the cell. So they come over to the cell, hop inside the cell, and now you can give some energy to those starving mitochondria, but they do have to remember how to use it. So there is a ramp-up phase that, well, sometimes takes a little longer than I wish it did. So here's what happens over time is that as your body gets a little less crabby, 2 of those receptors disappeared. You notice that we went from 5 receptors down to 3 receptors, and the body got a little healthier, at which point glucose and ketones can come into that muscle cell. So, but this diseased cell, nobody's telling you. Nobody's saying, hey, guess what? Your muscle cell on the inside is running out of sugar because you stopped eating carbs, and the sugar, which is plenty high when you prick your finger, is not getting into the inside of the cell. This is when we need to metabolically flex your system. All right, I'm going to drive home the point here in just a hot minute, but I'm going to do one thing before I do that. All right, so I have a couple of updates on my website that I want you to see. So first of all, let's go to the home cell. So on the Dr. Boz website, you will see that there is Dr. Boz favorites, where I have that pointer right here. And when we click on that, I do want you to notice that our continuous glucose monitor is up and running. It is absolutely working. When you click on this continuous glucose monitor, it will link you to the landing page, which teaches you about continuous glucose monitors. I think these are the same. This is the front page of our website. You can click over here on CGM. The frequently asked questions are specifically related to CGM, and we are doing our best to have tested it enough times that we are confident that when people click on this and ask for this service, we are able to give it to you. So in the just a brief review so that we don't get people confused about that, I would really love it if you listen to the video or you at least read through the text on here to know who should have one of these. Continuous glucose monitors, that's what I wear on mine. That's what I put on my husband, and we both stay accountable. I am currently in the middle of a 72-hour fast, leading a whole bunch of students through this. And I'll tell you, I really do sometimes hate knowing what my blood sugar is doing, defying me at times. This prescription has a processing fee. That processing fee goes to Meaningful Medicine. This is the name of my clinic. That clinic is an internal medicine clinic and we are stepping our way back into practice. So this is step one of our journey. And that prescription will last you a year. You still do need to send that, go to your pharmacy, talk to your pharmacist, and get as much, there's several coupons that we can give you to get you a cash price. Insurance does not cover this. Insurance does not cover this. I'm going to say that one more time. Because you are using it for self-study, I don't care how good your insurance is, it is not covered for people who are using it for self-study. And that's what this show is all about. I do also want to show that if you want one-on-one help, there is a wonderful company called Levels. I just did a podcast with them. They have been offering a CGM for a lot longer than I have, and they are amazing. They do research on diabetes and reversing diabetes. They also have one-on-one coaching that they can offer for learning about your glucose and how to reverse things. They are wonderful. And if you click on this link to get to them, then they know that I sent you. And I really do want them to know that I support their business. Last thing that I want to go through is if you were trying to go to Keto-Palooza, where I'm speaking next week, I am so happy for my friend that she sold out. Sign up for next year, but she is thankfully going to have a wonderful exhibit. So thank you for everybody that did sign up. I will see you there next week. And let's get back to the rest of our lecture. Let's see here. Oh, one more thing. I'm supposed to, I told I would not forget to say this. So under our shop, anybody who does buy a product from us over the next 2 months, we are putting in a free set of stickers, 2 stickers that say, I am a cycle breaker. If you watched our series over the summer, it has been a wildly successful trying to help you identify with those who are able to break the cycle. And part of that cycle is the exact thing we're talking about tonight on our show, which is if you've been the person who couldn't lose the weight, who says, yeah, doc, I lost 70 pounds. And I have several of those people in the group. I have a coach in the group who's doing great, but losing the last 20 pounds is not what she was interested in. I'm good enough. I'm so much better than before. And I'm pushing her to say, no. You want to lose the final 20 pounds. It really does make a difference inside here, inside these cells. So let's go back to where we started this show, which was in our 4 sets of patients. We had 1, 2, 3, 4. So green was our 1, blue was our 2, orange was our 3, and red was our 4. These 4 groups of people took in glucose, and if the doctor was only checking, I'm going to do this over here, 1, 2, 3, 4. If the doctor was only checking the glucose at the 2-hour mark, they would have missed, well, it would have been very difficult to say, boy, they didn't quite get back to normal, but are they all right? Well, let's follow these patients. In fact, let's follow 5,000 of them and see who had problems 12, 13, 14, 15 years later. So here's our little group here, and follow the colors of those folks as you look at this. So again, this is time. So we just couldn't draw these in. This is, I bet, 10. I think this is 13, and I think this was 15. That just didn't fit on the slide here. So looking at these markers in time, well, maybe it's in 2s. Let me try that again. Obviously there. 2, 4. So here is the incidence. And what disease are we talking about? Yeah, this is diabetes. When you look at the people who got diabetes, it doesn't surprise me that the amount of diabetes was, I can't even do the math in my head, how many times higher from the first group to the second group. But what is even more remarkable is there was only a slight difference in what the glucose did at the end of that 2 hours between group number 2 and group number 3. They were both excessively making insulin, And by excessive, I mean that group number 3 wasn't even that much worse on the insulin charts. If you go back and look at that graph, the insulin chart is only slightly higher, but it did not control those glucose at the 30-minute mark. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So in this slide, again, remember those are 10, 12, and 14 years over there on the side. Here we saw the growth of these 4 lines be a little less dramatic, but this was cardiovascular disease, and it was defined by a major event, whether that was a heart attack or a stroke. We could see that the green group still had problems, but nothing like what the other 3 sets did. And that this group where the 2-hour mark was back down to normal, they had a high trajectory of that cardiovascular disease. And then finally, there's not a study that is worth its weight in gold if you don't look at all-cause mortality, any reason people die. And when you look at all-cause mortality, look that this one with the strange, uncontrollable blood sugar, but the insulin wasn't quite right. It wasn't super excessive. It just wasn't great. Well, they had the highest all-cause mortality. So when I look at this and say, well, what's the point? What's the punchline? Number 1, when you're looking at predicting your health, and many people have come to my channel and they've read the books, and I can't thank you enough for every one of you that's left a review on Amazon. I am a self-published author. Again, every single one of your reviews did something remarkable in my life. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You read the books, and you did an awesome transition in your life. You lowered the carbohydrates, you lowered your insulin, you opened up fat cells, you lost weight. And then many of you plateaued. Many of you said, you know what, I don't think I can get any further. I think this is as good as I'm going to get. And when you look at body mass index, when you look at blood sugars, you say, well, they're better than they were. Do I have to try any harder? What I want to inspire you with is these are measurable metrics in your own home. In one way is a continuous glucose monitor, and it is a fascinating experiment of, well, I wish I could tell you is this awesome experience of saying, isn't it lovely what my blood sugars are doing? But it is actually a reality check of what my blood sugars are doing. The second thing that I couple that with is my ketones. That insulin that I was trying to show you, well, what is that really teaching us? Well, when on this channel, time and time again, I've shown you something that we affectionately call the Dr. Boz ratio, which is taking glucose and ketones at the same time, looking at them like I do at the beginning of every one of my shows. And hopefully, if I don't forget, at the end of this show, that glucose and ketone production is a predictor of how much insulin it's taking to get the job done. And when patients first get on the ketogenic diet, their insulin is so much better relative to what it used to be. So it's in that zone where the insulin went from 5 units of insulin to 3 units of insulin. And the cells on the mitochondria on the inside of that muscle cell were crabby. They're irritable. They want a different fuel. And it stings the liver to say, make me some ketones. Ketones are not dependent on insulin to get inside that muscle cell. And sure enough, it satisfied that muscle cell. They felt good. Their energy was back. It did the same thing to their brain cells. And as they purred along, really reversing several of those metabolic problems, well, they plateaued. Now the insulin is letting the glucose into that muscle cell, and that's fine. That's healthy. You're supposed to do that. But you have so much stored energy in the form of fat. That's what that body mass index was showing you. As the body mass went up, as their BMI went up, those fat cells in excess are stored energy that you couldn't use. To reverse them, you do have to fight this game called insulin resistance. That when people check morning fasting blood sugars once a year because they went to their doctor and said, my lab was fine. I'm saying, do not trust your doctor to do that. You shouldn't trust me if I'm your doctor to do that. You need to be looking at this much more frequently. And when folks get to the place where they say, I just can't lose that 20 pounds, I don't know why it doesn't work for me. It did work when they first stressed their metabolism, but they're in a plateau because of insulin resistance. And it is those 12 steps inside the keto continuum where I say, if you're plateaued, it is time to stress your metabolism to the next level. And I tell a story all throughout that book about every stinking mistake you can possibly make on the ketogenic diet using David's story for his metabolic flex. All right, so the punchline, I hope you understood, and maybe that would be a great idea for everybody to say, did I lose you? Write like 5 words or 1 sentence to say, what's the point of what I'm trying to make? I hope you're writing something that, okay, insulin resistance is hidden. Even when you're going to your doctor and you think it's safe, it really is marking to see how well does your body respond when glucose goes in, and what amount of ketones and glucose should you be checking as you're at the 30-minute mark, at the 60-minute mark, at the 2-hour mark, and I contend you should do it at, well, 2 hours is long enough, actually, where the glucose should be back to normal. And it should be ketones back to what they were at the beginning of that stimulus. If you're not metabolically flexible, you need to be doing a stress to your metabolism to reverse and repair it. You're not stalled because you're an alien. You're stalled because you're insulin resistant. And to reverse it takes a long period of time where you lower the amount of insulin and lower the amount of glucose while you replicate the cells in your body. Your beta cells in your pancreas making the insulin, your muscle cells throughout your body that are using the insulin, even brain cells using insulin, they all need to be built and replicated in this new chemistry set that is a lower insulin and lower glucose than you were before. All right, let's get to some of your questions. I hope there's questions because it means I didn't lose you. And I am going to go over to this page here. Let's go. Hang tight, hang tight. I gotta go here. There we go. All right, so we have Pat D, who says, I have severe hypoglycemia due to a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass surgery 11 years ago. Is it safe to continue on my keto diet? You know, we just had a case about this in our 21-day course this week, and the case centered around what I recommend she does in her journey on the keto continuum. So there is a place in the keto continuum that I skip a few steps. I take the patient from what is a 6-hour window to a 1-hour window, and I call it OMAD, or all calories in 1 hour, because people would say, well, this is the only meal I'm eating, but they were snacking and chewing gum outside of that meal, outside of that time. So that part in the book is where this Roux-en-Y patient is. This is Roux-en-Y, for those of you that don't know, is gastric bypass. They do skip a few places where the nutrients is absorbed. And so they are constantly fighting a low iron. They're constantly fighting a low B12. There are other minerals that are absorbed in the sections where those fat-soluble vitamins and those microminerals and iron are supposed to be absorbed. So what did I tell this person to do? I said, it's going to be really hard for you, and I would actually agree that most people cannot get the nutrient density packed into 1 hour. Now, I've got some master skills patients who can, but they work really hard at eating things like, sardines and bone marrow and organ meat, not because they're trying to gross you out, but because they're trying to say every bite needs to have the highest density of nutrients. Not only does that improve the absorption when you have a nutrient-dense, non-processed food, but when somebody has a Roux-en-Y like you do, Pat, that the volume of food matters. First of all, every time they stretch their gut with an over excessive amount of food, so they try to put all that food into 1 hour, they really do struggle. Almost all of my Roux-en-Y patients, I insist they get their numbers checked every year, and probably should be more often than that. So that includes iron, that includes vitamin D, that includes their B12. I could go on for several layers here, but the minimum is looking at nutrients getting to the inside of you, really getting absorbed. And that when I put them on a ketogenic diet, I need the lowest level of inflammation at the layer of the gut. And I contend that is a diet that isn't filled with processed foods and fiber. It is not a vegan diet. It is a nutrient-dense, you could almost call it a Paleolithic ketogenic diet. And that PKD is something that Sophia Clemens really, I think she coined it. She's from Hungary, and the meats are not all built the same. It is not chicken breasts that she's telling her patients to eat. They are, sausage. They are oxtail, which sounds weird, but it's a fatty meat with cartilage and some of the gross stuff. But it sure is a better formula for those folks who do have a structural deficit of not being able to get that nutrients in as quickly as they should. So not only do I make sure I answer the question here, that I would say, yes, it's safe, and it is a very important responsibility to not think is going to fade away. You do need to check those nutrients every year. And I contend the ones who've done the best, not only in the weight loss, getting those endocrine things down that we just talked about in the last hour, but also keeping away from the pathology of eating, or maybe otherwise called an eating disorder, of that they are highly linked to the reward of eating, and that's caused them to be overweight. All right, so let's go to M. Says, what do you think the equivalent of a glucose tolerance test at home would be if I'm trying to find my glucose response using a CGM? Great question. So there is, oops, not that one. There is a answer that is short, and there's one that's long. The answer that's short is painful for me to say out loud, but one of the best ways so first of all, when you're doing an experiment, you need to be able to reproduce it. So one of my favorite ways to do this is to buy, well, I call it a Mexican Coca-Cola. Yeah, it's made with real sugar. There's not fake sugar in it. It's not high fructose corn syrup. It's the Coca-Cola. They're in glass bottles. You got to look to find them, but it's a measurable dose that you can quickly consume, because the other part of a glucose tolerance test is that the glucose needs to go in rather quickly. Now, my husband I think his mother put Coca-Cola in his baby bottle. He loves it so much. So being married to me, I first educated him on how awful that is for your system, and how even a diet formula would be better for you. And even though people say, well, it has more, the sugar is so toxic. It is just a high level of sugar, but it's a great way to do a glucose tolerance test, because it's an easy, there's, Coca-Cola, as much as I don't want to say this, is refreshing. It's got that, effervescence in it, because it's got the nitrogen fizz in it. And it is by far my sons all know the danger of drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana and all the things that can happen to their brain. But I pounded the crap out of their education that you cannot drink a Coca-Cola until your bones are fully fused at the age of 21, because it does terrible things to bone growth. Anyway, so that's totally off on a tangent, but I maybe it's a shout out to see if my husband listens tonight, to see what I said about Coca-Cola. So yes, I would use a Coca-Cola. It is, it's about the only time I'm going to recommend a Coca-Cola. So Joseph says, I lost 15 pounds in 7 weeks, but been stuck for 2 weeks. Have done a 24-hour fast. I'm on 4 different low-dose blood pressure medicines and Lipitor. Are the meds the reasons I'm stuck? No, Joseph, the meds are not the reason you're stuck. When you look at that 24-hour fast, I would love to know what your fast is at 36 hours. When I look at patients with insulin resistance, it's why in my world, I do not use the F word. I do not use the word fasting until they're at 36 hours. It's because people play tricks that if they eat here And then they get to their that 24-hour mark, then they get to eat again. And I will tell you, studying insulin resistance, especially if you've been around the sun a few times, that insulin resistance is going to be hard. It's going to take longer than 24 hours in the absence of calories, and I mean salt and water only, to get you to the place where you see that blood sugar, you push through and you break through the next layer of an insulin resistant system. And I contend people can't get there with one fast. You got there with thousands of binges, thousands of times that your glucose went way too high, that you produced buckets of extra insulin over time because of this. To reverse it, you have got to deny the body any calories for that 36, and I'd push you to say 48 eventually, but start with 36, because that is really where you start to learn, okay, yes, your body can do this. Yes, your mitochondria can get a little workout. Use ketones instead of glucose, and you'll know you're making progress, because at the end of the 24 hours, at the end of the 36 hours, the glucose will be lower and the ketones will be higher, both of which you can prick your finger and measure. It's not a guess. It's not some kind of witch's brew. It absolutely is a measurable process. And you will be stuck because you're insulin resistant until you lower the insulin, which means you lower the glucose long enough that your hormone of insulin coming from your pancreas has less of a stimulus to make insulin. It will be far more insulin than I make, but that doesn't matter in your body. It matters that whatever you've been making for the last 2 weeks that you're stalled for sure, it needs to be lower if you want to lose weight. If you want fat to go away from your body, you have to lower the insulin. So great question. It's not your blood. It's not your meds. It's a different problem there. Okay, let's go back to the chat. I will tell you that I am at the end of this fast, and usually on Tuesday nights I let myself eat, but I'm not doing that tonight, so it is definitely harder for me right now. I'm going to check my blood sugar here in a few more minutes and see how I'm doing, but let's answer a couple more questions. I've been following the program, including a 48 to 50-hour fast weekly. If the goal of eating this way is to heal in prepping for potential pregnancy, God bless you and your future baby, is losing that final 20 essential? Well, Christina, I will tell you that women who head into pregnancy with those extra 20 pounds, well, those 20 pounds are there because of excess insulin. And when you gestate a baby in a high insulin state, you have made them destined for a higher risk for diabetes and being obese. They were made in a bath of insulin. They will fight insulin resistance for their whole life. Now, your behavior when you're around them, not having meals excessively, not letting them snack at night, not feeding them 15 times a day, but 3 meals a day will do, especially if they're high fat and low processed carbs. That baby will learn what foods are healthy because they'll watch you. But you will have an endocrine mismatch if you gestate the baby with those extra 20 pounds around. So I would recommend keep losing until you're pregnant and then be healthy. Don't be carb riddled. You're going to be insulin resistant when you're pregnant. That's part of how you keep a baby in there. It doesn't mean you can't be on keep your eating window at a reasonable time, eating whole foods and really nourishing the baby without the burden of excess insulin. All right. Let me do this last question, and then I will check my sugars and call it a night. I'm starting week 3 keto and still having diarrhea. I do have a history of irritable bowel. Not sure what to do. I'm using keto electrolytes in my water and salt. Excuse me. Well, T. cancella, I would tell you to go to chia seeds. There's another seed that's supposed to be really good for, I think they're called basil seeds. But either one of them swell up to 2 or 3 times the size and really do have a good antidote for some of the diarrhea on a ketogenic diet. I classically use chia seeds for constipation, and I write about that in my book about why I do that. If you get constipated on a ketogenic diet, chia seeds win every time. It really does gently show your body how to taper off of them and really get used to this new way of eating. But when folks are first on keto and they get diarrhea and it doesn't go away, chia seeds is the fastest way for the antidote, for slowing things down. But you may be having trouble absorbing fat. It goes away. Having the highest nutrient density for your fat is going to be a far better answer. I've actually in the last year told people, well, if you put sardines as your first meal of the day, and then you eat whatever it is that you're going to eat on a ketogenic diet, they do a lot better. There is something about sardines not only being high fat, high protein, nutrient dense, but you don't binge on them. So you eat them. They don't eat them usually too fast, but then the satiety that comes after that can of sardines. And I don't mean finish the can of sardines and quickly eat. I mean, finish the can of sardines, wait a couple hours, check in mentally with, are you still hungry, and see if you can now eat another meal on your ketogenic diet. The reason why is many times when people get on a ketogenic diet at the beginning, your gut is learning to absorb fat, so that is a learned skill. By 3 weeks, you should be doing better, and when they're not, sometimes they're still just gluttonous in how they eat. I'm using that word on purpose, that they just seem to say, this is the volume of food I used to eat, and I'm still eating it. And your gut's saying, hey, it's way too much fat and food for us to be able to absorb it. So it's sending it out the backside with a bunch of fat in it, which will be diarrhea. All right, so I'm going to check my numbers here and just look at some of the comments as I finish checking my numbers. So I can now see several of you. I do want to also say that I have had several patients in my 21-day course that, oh my gosh, they really have taught me how powerful it is. A couple of them with strange things like POTS syndrome. I don't know if you know what that is. A couple other ones with, severe depression that, they've really tried several things for it. We are now in the final week of this. They're in the end of that 21-day metabolic push. We have 4 days left of it. And my goodness, their transitions in 3 weeks just continues to inspire me that I'm going to keep doing it this way. We are helping a lot of people. We are clearly making a difference in their lives, but also it reinforces my mind that medicine needs to be done differently. The classroom effect, not only is it refreshing for me to be able to see, students answering each other's questions because you teach one and they teach one another, and that alone helps sustain their commitment, but it keeps me energized saying, look at how much good can be done, and they don't need to see me to get that done. Yeah, I can totally tell that my blood sugar was at. Yeah. Blood sugar 58, ketones counting down still, 2.6, yeah. So I think that's about what they were at the beginning of the show, but that's definitely a bunch lower. Maybe it's because I'm a little less stressed and I did get through the slides, hopefully in a way that some people understood. And I am going to sign off and say thank you for all of you that have supported my business, my team, and our channel. Your commitment to showing up helps us, and any of those clicking on the links that help us to stay in business and doing this for free every